Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the events that Bandai is going to be holding, and I wanted to highlight one in particular just because I think it's a fantastic idea that Bandai is trying to do, and that's going to be something they did last year with the upcoming Halloween event. So the Halloween event is, like last year, just going to be another in-store event that is going to have a couple of nice cards that are getting alt art treatments with some spooky theme to it. And this time it is going to be of the Tamers featured in Season 3 of the anime, Tamers. So this is going to be an in-store event, as I kind of already said, to try to support and promote the usage and to purchase of Starter Decks 18, which is Guardian Vortex, a mono green deck, and Fable Waltz, Starter Deck 19, a mono yellow deck, and those two decks are also going to be releasing alongside of Digimon Liberator EX7. So this event is, as a result, going to be a color-locked event that's going to only allow you to use yellow and green decks respectively, because the idea from a marketing standpoint is you're going to buy into one or both of the decks, and then you're going to upgrade it with EX7 because EX7 has lots of good cards to promote those decks to be even stronger, and then you should have a deck ready to go for this style of event. And as far as when this event is taking place, well, it's going to be taking place between September 13th, which was the original release date of these starter decks, so I don't know if the stores are actually going to be pushing this event back to coincide with the new release date of all three of those products, which was delayed by a week in most areas, so it could actually end up being on September 20th instead of September 13th, but it'll last all the way up and through the end of October, so it's a good way to try to support and promote some various other playstyles and ways to approach the game. It's more so a new player friendly event because as far as what the format is, it's still a standard constructed event, so you're still going to be playing with all of the same rules that we know and love, just your deck has to be either yellow or green. And the cool thing is that when it comes to 2-color cards, 2 and 3-color cards are still legal because part of their color identity needs to be of one of those 2 colors, so that way you can still play something like a yellow-red card or a blue-green card, just as an example, because part of their color identities matches with what is legal for this event. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility in range in the decks that are actually able to be played and the card pool that you're going to be playing with. But as far as what you're actually going to be getting for participating in this event, as I kind of mentioned, each of the cards are going to be tamer-centric, and we're going to be getting all 3 of the participation cards in one pack. And as far as the winner card, this is where it's a little bit more on the lackluster side, but this is a more casual event, so we are going to be getting EX2 Rio, which is arguably the worst of these cards, but if you still want the full set, you're going to have to try to compete and win just to be able to complete it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it puts a whole lot of emphasis on trying to be hardcore because, again, this is more of a casual event trying to support newer players for wanting to buy into the game, because anytime they release starter decks is usually a good time to jump into the game because that gives you the easiest entry point to actually having access at a deck to learn how to play, which I think is fantastic. The only issue is when we actually talk about what the meta is to follow, which is what the rest of this video is going to be talking about. This is where things get a little bit on the unfortunate side. So, as we kind of already learned with other color-locked events in the past, usually it's kind of a polarizing meta because we just take whatever was meta competitive and viable in terms of what actually was winning bigger events, and we basically just devolved to playing only those decks. So starting off with the green side, I'm only going to be highlighting 2 decks of each color because anything outside of these 4 decks I realistically don't think are going to have the highest chance of success winning, even though they could win in of themselves. I'll highlight a couple of others after. But as far as the big running green deck that I think is going to be the best in having a good chance at being able to win, that's going to be Tyrant Kabuterimon. So Tyrant Kabuterimon, what he has and what he's bringing to the table compared to every other green deck is, well, just the amount of protection and immunities this card has. And that's what's making him going to be even more powerful in this type of environment with obviously less answers to be able to check him. And then that leads me to the second best green deck that I think is going to be played in high prevalency for this type of environment, which is going to be the Rapidmon deck. So Rapidmon still has a lot going for it. It doesn't have as much protection as what Tyrant Kabuterimon is doing, but it does have lots of really strong and powerful control tools that could be highly oppressive at times, just because the deck mostly is just going to be able to digivolve off of its level 4s into almost any of its level 6s, which is really strong. And then switching things up and talking about the best yellow deck that we have access to for this event, I honestly think it's still going to be Yellow Armor Vaccines. So even though, yes, Yellow Armor Vaccines did end up getting some kind of a nerf, it's still a really strong deck in of itself because, again, Magnamon X Antibody is similar to Tyrant Kabuterimon, where it just has lots of immunities that's going to be really hard to be playing against, especially against a reduced amount of options to be able to handle what he's presenting or threatening. And the last yellow deck I'm going to be talking about is going to be Shine Greymon. So Shine Greymon does have some good tools that we're losing out on in red, but we at least have yellow tools to try to make up for what we're losing. And the deck is still just a very powerful deck in of itself, focusing on utilizing our Marcuses, not only as a point of aggression, but as an extra resource as well. And the common thread between these four decks and kind of just everything else, outside of obviously their speed and consistency, is their protection and counterplay that they have access to that not that many other decks actually do, especially with the reduced amount of tools for this type of meta environment. But as far as some other green decks that I kind of want to spend some time highlighting, I do think that you could be really cute and cheeky with a green gacha style deck trying to cheese on your evolutions. Then we do have the Leomon deck that is still a pretty decent deck just because Fortitude. Then we do have Plants, Fairies, and Vegetations in the form of Bloom Lordmon or Rosemon that you could dip your toes into. They're both still pretty decent and strong decks. We do have a Digimon more tamer focused deck that you could play around with, as well as Leopardmon X Antibody for just having an alternative way to try to go up your stages and then just start hard playing your big bodies for relatively cheap. Then we do have the Diarabbitmon deck that you could play around with, which is basically All-Force in green, but a little bit differently. And like the event says, you also do have the starter deck for green, which on top of we do have Cherubimon Alliance that could be pretty fun to play around with, on top of Pulsemon and Kazuchimon. And it's not like green is the only other color that has some really good, strong, fun decks that we could think about building and playing towards. So we do have some DNA decks that are utilizing yellow that we can build towards, as well as yellow hybrids that's still going to be somewhat viable. Then you could think about trying to build a security control style deck, which isn't bad either, especially considering what the field is that you're going to have to play against and the protections you have to try to play around. Then on top of that, we do have a couple of yellow vaccine-based decks that we can play. We do have 4 Great Dragons, 3 Great Angels, and just, well, yellow vaccine. Good stuff. On top of the fact that, similarly to green, we also are going to be getting a new yellow starter deck, so you could build towards the Liberator Puppet deck as well as Kazuchimon, because Kazuchimon does have access to a lot of tools for both green and yellow, so you could make something relatively strong there. And you could even think about building something like Shakamon. You just have to figure out what kind of a low end you're going to be running, but the core engine of the deck is all yellow, so it all still kind of just works. And that's kind of all I really have for this type of video. I think that it's going to be a really fun and interesting event just because it is a bit of a shakeup compared to the norm when it comes to being able to play different decks and see different decks played. So I definitely think that if you're a newer player, this is the perfect type of event to get yourself into, even if the meta environment might not necessarily be the greatest. It's still trying to be a relatively new player-friendly environment. So feel free to tell me your thoughts about this type of event down in the comments below. And if you liked and found this video to be helpful and informative, make sure to leave that like and subscribe and hit that noti bell so that way you know when videos are going to be going live. Thank you all for watching, and with that, I will see you in the next video.